God, I did it again. Hi, I am Nick D. Clements, and I used to make stuff like this. Hi. Now, I actually prefer build videos with narration. However, after editing this one and watching it, I was like, well, crap. I think I actually like this just as is. Quiet with the natural sounds. But I wanted to try making a narrated version anyway. So to start, I am just cutting a piece of 1/2-inch conduit with a portable bandsaw that I've propped up and clamped to it, hello doggy, to a cinder block. After measuring it to length. And to bend it into the shape I want, I'm just using a pipe bender. Now there's several ways to go about using a pipe bender, but for this application, I find it works better to bend the pipe on the bender instead of using the bender to bend the pipe. So I've just propped it up in some, again, cinder blocks, and I'm slowly bending it into the shape I want, which is a perfect arch. Now this arch is going to be far from perfect, but since I'm going to be covering most of it in AstroTurf, I can hide a lot of those imperfections. So again, just working it into a shape and getting it into something that I'm relatively happy with. And now that I have a decent arch, I'm going to start working on the base, which is just going to be made out of a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. Just checking to make sure that it is indeed wide enough for the arch that I've made. Rolling out my table saw. And cutting it to width. And then I'm going to put a piece of melamine on the top of it just to make it look a bit nicer and to make it easier to clean. Now I'm splitting some 2x4s, cutting it halfway through one way and then cutting it the rest in the other way, just to make it easier and safer to cut. And now these runners are basically to make a base on the bottom, one just so it's up off the ground a bit, but more importantly so I have an area to fill it with concrete and make it very heavy so that you don't actually have to stake it into the ground or anything. You can just put it wherever and a bird won't be able to lift off and take the perch with it. Once more, just checking the fit, making sure everything's going to line up. Removing some old glue from my glue cup. I'm just using a handy silicone brush to brush glue onto the wood. They're nice because you just let the glue dry and then peel off the dried glue and use them over and over. Then basically just gluing a frame onto the bottom, weighing down the corners with some bricks while I screw in the other ends. Pre-drilling some holes, firing in some screws. Now these screws are too long, actually screwed into my table, so I'm just going to grind the heads off with the grinder. And this really isn't a big deal since I'm covering the top with that piece of melamine anyway, so all of those grinding marks will be hidden. Now to help keep the concrete in, I am firing in a bunch of screws just to help anchor the poured concrete to the bottom. Bringing everything inside to do the glue up of the melamine top. Just pouring a bunch of glue. Spreading it all over the surface. And pressing down my melamine top. Throwing on a few clamps to keep it in place, and then propping it up on some useless rolls of duct tape that finally have a purpose of propping something up, because they certainly don't stick. And just throwing all the clamps that I have in my box to at least get the edges on tight. And the weight of the concrete on the duct tape standoff should be enough pressure to glue the rest of the melamine top on. Of course, this first batch I didn't make nearly enough, so I'll make several more batches until I can fill up that reservoir. And now this last batch might have been a little too thin, but it seemed to have dried out okay. Now if it does crack, you could easily throw on a piece of paneling or thin plywood on the bottom and it really wouldn't matter what the cement did. I decided just to leave it off just because I like the look of the raw concrete on the bottom. But if it ever did crack, you could glue it back in or just throw another sheet of wood on the bottom and it would still function just as fine. And that was a lot of concrete. It's very heavy, so even your biggest eagle isn't gonna take this anywhere. Putty knife would have been better for this operation, but I was just using a screwdriver to chip away some of the loose concrete. Now to drill some holes to mount the arch. They were measured very well. Ended up with a very good fit. Could be a better fit. Now, of course, I started securing it in, and it's only secured by a screw, so it's not that permanent, but I always forget to put the ring on. And it wasn't quite deep enough, so I removed the arch again, and for whatever reason, removed the ring, and then replaced the arch. And then finally noticing that I forgot to put the ring back on, remove the arch once again, put the ring back on, put the arch back on. And pretty much it's done at this point. I'm just finishing it off with applying some AstroTurf to the top of the arch. Just taping on the first edge and then wrapping it around. Now at first I'm just securing it with zip ties. Some people don't like zip ties, so actually in a little bit I'm going to be replacing those zip ties with electrical tape. But first I'm just going to clean up the bottom a bit, just scraping and sanding, and then dusting. And I'm just hitting it with a quick coat of shellac just to help protect the wood a bit and seal in the cement. Whether or not that does much, who knows. And I'm just throwing in an eyelet on the front. Can just be useful for different applications as well. But normally you'd tether the bird to the ring. But this eyelet can be useful when you're running a creance line. And here I am just replacing those zip ties with electrical tape. And a quick tease of the hawk, and I'll let past Nick take over. Alright, now, keep an eye out for next week's video, part 2, where I'll be making a second perch, this time a tall perch, and we'll spend a bit more time with that amazing creature we just saw. Because if I haven't mentioned it, my wife's a falconer, so I'm definitely going to be making some videos featuring her and her craft. But for now, my sincere thank you for watching. Once again, I am Nick D. Clements. If you're wondering, Nick is short for Nicholas, and the D stands for Dominic. Anyway, I'm off to make something else.